And now, the show they came for, the test you were not supposed to see. It's an unmanned drone aircraft. HPD, the Federal Department of Homeland Security, and other invited guests all watching to see how this drone could be used for police work in and around Houston. We tracked that drone from News Chopper 2, and that drone was able to use a high-powered camera to track us. Those cameras can actually look into people's homes or even follow them in moving cars, which raises all sorts of new questions.
First, there were eyes on the street, and now there are eyes in the skies. The Director of National Intelligence has given the go-ahead for the nation's spy satellites to be used regularly by U.S. civilian agencies and law enforcement.
This is a development all Americans should have great pride in because it expands and uses national technical systems, which we've built for tens of billions of dollars over many decades.
Spy satellites have primarily been used overseas to monitor things like war zones and terror training camps. They've also been used domestically, but sparingly, during events including Super Bowl games, presidential inaugurals, and hurricanes. Homeland Security officials say the satellites will now be used to protect borders and critical infrastructure.
Which includes ports, and looking at potential vulnerabilities and threats, as well as consequences of attacks.
Next in line, law enforcement agencies, which are expected to start using them next year. While they can provide crucial high-resolution images, there are limits to what these satellites can do. They can't see faces, and they can't listen. At least, that's what the government claims.
Now, there are brand new cybersecurity measures underway in the UK, and, well, they're pretty scary, to be honest. The British government has decided that it wants to have all communication outlets store data on their customers for at least a year. So that's going to allow the government to have access to every email, every phone call, everyone's entire internet history. Now, don't worry. The government promises that this won't create a super database. It'll simply give authorities the ability to investigate a suspect activity that would lead to crime or potential act of terrorism. Now, the interesting part about the whole thing is that just last December, the Labour government was against this legislation. Back in May, the two major political parties came up with a coalition agreement mentioning internet privacy concerns. And the document says that the government will end the storage of internet and email records without good reason. And now suddenly they have a good reason?
It's used in key cards, prepaid tolls, even checked luggage. It's called RFID technology, or radio frequency identification. Small chips that store information.
So, here's the chip.
And now that same technology is literally available in the flesh, with chips injected right into people's arms.
It says it burns a little bit. That's about it.
Atlanta firefighter John Santola was injected with the chip about the size of a grain of rice. When scanned, the number on the chip is linked to a database with Santola's medical history.
I had to go help me in case of an emergency.
Santola was chipped when Florida-based VeriChip Corporation set up a booth at an Atlanta firefighter conference. They market the chip primarily for safety reasons, storing medical information for first responders, Alzheimer's patients, even children.
It is the only product that has been approved by the FDA for this specific purpose.
The FDA approved the use of chips in humans in 2004, but since then it's caused quite a bit of controversy with some consumer groups, concerned about privacy, even health concerns.
These are very powerful tools, especially if they fall in the hands of somebody with political ambitions.
Well, the best way to understand RFID is to understand what the acronym stands for. The RF part stands for radio frequency. The ID part stands for identification, and that's because they're tiny microchips, little silicon wafers containing information that are hooked up to miniature antennas that use radio waves to transmit. So what that means is that if you have one of these tiny devices, the little microchip with its antenna combination, you can put those in literally anything. You can embed them in a plastic card, like an ID card. You can put them in a passport. You can embed them into somebody's shoes. There literally is a company that is marketing RFID tags embedded in people's shoes that they would not know was there. You can sandwich them between the layers of cardboard. They can go into virtually anything. And once you've got the RFID tag inside of an item, it lies dormant until it's stimulated by radio energy from the environment. So, for example, if you walk through a doorway, if the doorway is equipped with an RFID portal or RFID reader, it kind of bombards you head to toe with this energy, and if you're carrying something or wearing something that contains an RFID tag, that energy is picked up by the antenna, stimulates the chip, wakes it up, gives it just enough power to transmit its unique information. And in the case of most RFID tags, the information is a unique serial number, and the long-term plan for this is to create something called the Internet of Things, where literally every object on Earth, and when I say every object, they are envisioning every sewing needle, every jumbo jet, every pair of shoes, every Bible, literally every object on Earth containing one of these tags. The Internet of Things would be a way to track, monitor, and keep tabs on where everything is all the time.
Government spied on 500,000 UK citizens last year. The government last year gave permission to intercept the phone calls, letters and emails of more than 500,000 British citizens, a new report has revealed. The annual report of Interception of Communications Commissioner, Sir Paul Kennedy, showed the government's interception program targets people in the UK and overseas. More than 600 central, local and quasi-government bodies are entitled to ask for and intercept data, he said. This is related mainly to who contacted whom, where and when.
The question is why did I write Little Brother in a book about surveillance and civil liberties issues and state intervention in personal life, and a book that was kind of related to 1984? Well, I'd worked in civil rights and technology for a number of years when working for the Electronic Frontier Foundation in San Francisco, and also, so those issues mattered to me. And in the years since September 11th, I thought that we had really lost track of our priorities in terms of freedom and rights. And then I thought that Orwell got something important wrong. I think that Orwell looked at technology, and he saw that technology was giving power to the powerful at the expense of the powerless. That before, the government might have claimed that it had total control of your life, but as a practical matter, controlling you required a lot of work, and most people therefore got to slip through the cracks. But what technology did was multiply the power of the state. And he said, this is technology's role. It makes people less freer. And I think that he mistook a local effect for the global effect. I think that what technology globally does is it upsets whatever the normal thing is. So if you've got a normal thing that you want to keep that way, you're defending it, right? You've built a city, and you've built a wall around it, and you don't want anyone to knock down your city. And if someone else wants to knock the city down, they need to find one flaw in your wall. You need to make a perfect defense. They need to only find one imperfection in it to take it down. So Orwell saw this world in which the state gained more power through technology, but not long thereafter, certainly by my adolescence, technology was giving power back to individuals. It was allowing us to group together and to take action on our own bat, to do stuff without any kind of centralized authority or hierarchy, and that was really powerful. Now today I think people in your generation are seeing the next swing, where technology gives authorities power to assert even more control than they've ever had before. When I was an adolescent and I used computers, they not only had pterodactyls in them, but we also had no adult supervision. Literally no grown-up knew what we did with computers. There was no such thing as censorware. There was no control over what services we could reach. There was no control over what information we could find or who we could talk to. In today's world, every school or library that has federal funding has to have mandatory surveillance and censorware installed on it. Parents buy censorware for their home networks, and some of these companies are so creepy. I'm not saying your parents do. Some of these companies are so creepy. One of them was caught selling transcripts of kids' IM and email sessions to market research companies, right, to protect the kids. And we even have kids who are outfitted with cell phones that report their location in real time to their parents, like they were, paroled prisoners wearing an ankle cuff. We'll talk about that in a minute. So what I see is an encroachment on personal autonomy that's much greater than anything we've seen before. But I also think that we have within our technological world the seeds of another generation of technology that will take that back. And that's cryptography and homebrew technology and technology that allows us to form groups even more readily and technology that allows us to undermine surveillance and to confuse those who would surveil us. So all of that stuff comes together, I think, in Little Brother. And it's a story about the turning point, where we go from technology once again being a thing that asserts control to a technology that undoes it.
Your name is Tom. You live just off of 5th Street. Nice car, Tom. Nice house. What's not so nice is you owe Pennsylvania $4,212 in back taxes. Listen, Tom, we can make this easy. Pay online by June 18th, and we'll skip your penalty and take half off your interest. Because, Tom, we do know who you are.
Justice, it's not about agenda, it's not about mobilizing people, it's about dialing for corporate dollars. These two parties have sold the U.S. government and the American people to the highest bidders.